Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Lindsey.
I'm Jay.
I'm Ron.
And we are here to talk about the animated Lord of the Rings, starring Christopher Guard, William Squire, and Michael Scholes. Written by Chris Conkling and Peter S. Beagle, based on the books by J.R.R. Tolkien. Produced by Saul Zaentz and directed by Ralph Bakshi. Released in 1978 on an undetermined budget, somewhere between $4 and $12 million, it ended up grossing approximately $30.5 million or $30.5 million in the box office. Ron, let's start with you. What's your backstory? What's your background on this?
Oh, that's a great question. I've seen this a lot because it would periodically pop up on cable. And I would always obsessively watch it, or the Rankin and Bass Hobbit, or just whatever, whatever fantasy thing that popped up, I would usually end up watching it. Like if there was somebody getting stabbed or doing magic, or getting stabbed while doing magic, I was gonna be there.
Jay, what about you? What's your background with this?
I know at some point I saw this as a Ute, but I don't remember it specifically, and I've never read any of the books or anything like that. So this missed me. Not missed me. I tried and just didn't get into it, and kind of moved on to other stuff. And then I saw the Peter Jackson movies when they came out because my dad was a big fan of this, and I really got into those. And then subsequently went back and I saw the Hobbit movies, and I did go and read that later. But every time I've been like, I should actually read the three Lord of the Rings books. It's the same, like Moby Dick has sat on my Kindle for years now, and I get into it and then I just stop, and I don't know, I missed it. But this animated thing, I know I've seen part of somewhere along the way because, like Ron, it was on cable all the time. Watching it for this, parts of it seemed really familiar, and anyway, it was one of those things that I know has been in my brain, but it wasn't something that I remember specifically watching before.
I also saw all of the Peter Jackson movies, Jay, and I, however, had read all of the Lord of the Rings books and The Hobbit when I was in high school. Saw all the Peter Jackson films when they came out. And then somewhere very shortly after college, I think I had just recently graduated and was visiting one of my friends whose parents had this on VHS still. And I didn't realize that it even existed. So we popped in the VHS, and that was the first time I ever saw it.
I feel like in my head, I remembered things about The Secret of Nim, if either of you've ever seen that animated movie.
Yeah.
But I know now I'm not remembering Secret of Nim. I was remembering things about this movie. So that's why I know I've seen it. But they live in kind of the same animated world, even though this is not, the background's animated. We'll talk about the rotoscoping and all that stuff. But for some reason, these have melded in my brain in the years, and I don't know, I just feel like they kind of I cross remember them, even though they're very different stories.
I can see that. Secret of the Nim is so really dark and kind of scary.
That is a very dark children's story, just as an aside.
Yeah.
By the way, so is this, though, by the way. So I
And
forgot how violent this was.
Yeah.
and if you're not remembering this, you're remembering one of the other Bakshi movies they did about this time, like Wizards or American Pop, which I think they showed on VH1 a lot.
Maybe that's it. So I'm not as familiar with his oeuvre. When I went back and looked at it, I know I've heard people talk about it. I've never seen Wizards. American Pop, though, I think is something I have seen because of the VH1 connections. But yeah.
Yeah, and they're all fairly rotoscoping heavy, like this one. So
Yeah. And when I think of animated rotoscope, I think of things that are beyond this, like Scanner Darkly, like when I was in a big Philip K. Dick cinematic phase, for several years. I watched that, and then I think of some of the work like in the original Tron was rotoscoped, and then obviously everybody knows like the lightsabers and all that stuff in Star Wars is all rotoscoping. But which is a neat technique, and it's one of those things that's just kind of lost, I think, to CGI now. But it gives there's things in this movie though that, and we'll talk about like the ring race in particular, like that's burned in my head. So when they popped on the screen, I was like, oh yes, I remember the nightmare that induced, So when I saw this, because they are really good and scary, but Ralph
They
Bakshi's stuff is like
creepy.
dark. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm asking you on this lens because again, I'm not as familiar with the source material, and I don't know if Ron is or not. I'll get him to weigh in on that in a minute. Are the books like as freaky and dark as the versions of this that I've seen, this and the Peter Jackson stuff?
Yeah. 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 Super. I mean, it's really dark and scary. Obviously, Peter Jackson's take way darker, way scarier, but he's working with way more live action. So watching anything animated is immediately going to soften the fear factor a little bit, I think.
Yeah, the books are pretty dark, and the Hobbit is a tale he was telling his children, and then he went back and
Right.
fleshed out, added to the universe with a more grown up book. Probably because he had already invented some languages and he needed an excuse to use them in something.
Yeah, that's the wild part about this is it's a little bit akin to George R.R. Martin in the way that like the Game of Thrones world sort of grew out of his head out of just sort of one thing, and then it became 17 other things, and now it's something he can't even ravel and finish anymore. But the Tolkien influence on that was always obvious to me, even again not being familiar with the source material, seeing the way it had been turned into cinema, I was like, well, that's obviously an influence for this. And then anytime you've heard George talk about it, he says, oh yeah, definitely, I'm borrowing from a lot of that, and so that's fine. It's neat to see this attempt at this though, because I know that Rankin and Bass Hobbit thing that Ron referenced as well, and that's very like fun and kind of bouncy, and and that's sort of my memories of the Hobbit anyway. Which this movie's definitely not that, but I don't know. I don't know. It's fun to. I don't want to say rediscover this. I guess that's what it was though this time around to do this. But Linz, this is like your jam though. Like you've been on this for a while. Like we've talked about doing this on Film Strip, I think since you joined the
Yeah.
show. So
Yeah, but it's hard to figure out how to do 3, really 6, if we're doing the extended cut versions of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. It's it's hard to do that in, a 1 hour, ideally 1 hour show. So, maybe
yeah.
someday we'll figure it out, but
Mhm.
this is it's kind of a happy medium. I mean, they do only get to 2/3 of the trilogy in one movie, but
Yeah, why is that? Does anybody know? I mean, I know budgetarily wise, it makes sense because it's so dense. Like you can't make a 4 hour animated movie. I get that. But why did they do the first 2/3 or not even? I don't even think this is all the Two Towers from what I understand. It's just enough of it. Why not ever come back and do this again? Because this thing made money. I mean, it wasn't like it was a bomb.
Well, he didn't want to. Well, he stopped where he stopped because Ralph actually, because he didn't want to end on a cliffhanger. He wanted to kind of stop at a natural stopping point for the story.
That's fair.
As to why they didn't go back to it, as it turns out, it's hard to work with a producer who hates you. And Bakshi and Salzans did not get along whatsoever. And as the movie progressed, their enmity towards one another only got worse and worse.
I mean, I don't know. Metallica still seems to put together albums with Bob Rock, so it can be done, but fair.
but unpleasant, I'm sure. So, well, I guess before we get into it, I do have a little bit of a plot summary I
I,
worked up.
I was
It's
gonna,
long if you guys can bear with me.
I was gonna say, there's no way to be summary with this. Please give all the detail because I got like lots of questions and
I cut it
pronunciation?
back as much as I felt I comfortably could.
All right.
And feel free, to interrupt with questions during or after. And I will do my best to answer. It's been at least a couple years since I've entered the Lord of the Rings universe via the books anyway. So I'll do my best to answer any backstory questions. But for this film, we open with a lot of backstory really early in the second age of Middle Earth, where elven smiths forged the rings of power. 9 rings for mortal men, 7 for the dwarf lords, and 3 for the elf kings. At the same time, the Dark Lord Sauron, remember that name, Jay, made the one ring to rule them all after learning the secrets of how to forge these rings from the elves of Holland. As the last alliance of elves and men fell, the One Ring fell into the hands of Prince Isildur, who ended up being killed by orcs, and he left the ring to lay at the bottom of the river Anduin for an undetermined amount of time, centuries, millennia. But over time, Sauron captured the 9 rings that he made for men and turned the owners of those rings into the ring wraiths, which we were just discussing earlier, which are basically just evil, zombie-like dudes who roam the world searching for the One Ring. The ring ended up being found by a hobbit-like creature named Daegel, whose friend Smeagol ended up murdering him and stole the ring for himself. Then the ring warped Smeagol, mind, and body into the creature we now know and love as Gollum. Hundreds of years later, the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, finds Gollum's precious ring and takes it back to the Shire for himself. So that was just the opening bit of the
The
movie.
first,
We
like,
learned
3
all
minutes
of
of the
that. Yeah,
movie.
yeah. We learned all of that in a very short period of time.
Whew, okay.
So then the movie itself opens. So years later, we are out of the backstory and in the present day of the film during Bilbo's birthday / going away celebration in the Shire, where the wizard Gandalf tells him to leave the ring to Frodo, Bilbo's nephew, when Bilbo leaves for Rivendell. 17 years later, after Bilbo has already left, Gandalf returns to the Shire when he learns that evil forces have discovered that the ring is in the possession of a Baggins. Gandalf meets with Frodo to explain the situation, and Frodo quickly leaves the Shire with his 3 friends, Sam, Pippin, and Merry, and the One Ring. After they narrowly escape from the ringwraiths, the hobbits make it to a town called Bree, where they meet a pantsless Aragorn, who is introduced to them as Strider, who is a friend of Gandalf's who plans to help the hobbits get to Rivendell.
Okay, I'm glad you said the pantsless thing because I had a note on my side. It's like, why is pantsless, dark-haired He-Man in this movie all of a sudden? But we'll
No
get there.
idea. But yeah, we
Okay.
will discuss for
It's
sure.
not pantsless, dark-haired He-Man. It's Danny Trejo because he looks like Danny Trejo.
Where they meet a pantsless Danny Trejo, who is introduced to them as Strider, a friend of Gandalf's, who helped the hobbits get to Rivendell. Well, on their way, Frodo is stabbed by a ring wraith with an evil knife, a piece of which breaks off inside his shoulder and continues to spread poison. They escape the ring wraiths momentarily, but they catch up with the hobbits and company shortly after they meet the elf, Legolas. But that's okay. The ring wraiths are swept away by the enchanted river just before they reach a very sick Frodo. The hobbits and company make it to Rivendell, where Frodo is healed by its Lord Elrond. Gandalf makes it to Rivendell as well, where we learn that his fellow wizard Saruman, not to be confused with Sauron, plans to join forces with Sauron. Bilbo, Gandalf, and the others argue about what should be done with the One Ring, and Frodo volunteers to go to Mordor, where the ring can be destroyed. Frodo leaves Rivendell with 8 companions: Gandalf, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, Gimli the Dwarf, and Frodo's OG 3 ride or dies, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. Their attempt to cross the Misty Mountains is foiled by heavy snow, so they're forced to take a path under the mountains via Moria, which is an ancient dwarf kingdom that is now full of orcs and other evil creatures. And while venturing through Moria, Gandalf falls into an abyss while battling a Balrog, which is that flamey, lion-heady, weird creature. The remaining 8 members of the Fellowship continue through the elf haven Lothlorien, but Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo. Frodo decides to leave the others behind and continue his quest alone, but faithful Sam insists on accompanying him. Boromir ends up being killed by orcs while trying to defend Merry and Pippin, who are captured by the orcs. The hobbits escape. Merry and Pippin escape the orcs and flee into the forest where they meet Treebeard, a huge tree-like creature also known as an Ent. And while tracking Merry and Pippin into the forest, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas find Gandalf. That's right, he's not dead. The 4 ride to Rohan's capital, where Gandalf persuades the King Theoden that his people are in danger and they need to fortify against the Dark Army. Meanwhile, Frodo and Sam discovered Gollum stalking them and capture him. Frodo pities him, lets him live in return for guidance to Mount Doom, and Gollum promises to lead them to a secret entrance to Mordor. Cut back to Helm's Deep, where Theoden's troops have fortified, but struggle to resist the orc army sent by Saruman. Gandalf arrives right in the nick of time with riders of Rohan to destroy the orc army, and everyone seems to be on the road to living happily ever after.
I mean, that's a good
Questions,
job.
thoughts?
Yeah, lots along the way. That's a good job of summing all that up because there's a lot happening here.
Before we jump too far ahead, I left something out. So it's not just pantsless Danny Trejo; it's Jack Palance as Danny Trejo,
It is a very Jack Palance face. You're right. Yeah.
or Danny Trejo as Jack Palance. I haven't figured out which is which yet, but either way.
I think you're right. I think Trejo would portray Palance because Palance would have been before Trejo, but neither of which are involved in this movie. So
no, but we did not mention Anthony Daniels.
yeah,
C-3PO. He's in this movie.
He's the elf, right?
He's
That Orlando
Legolas, yeah.
Bloom plays in.
Yep.
Okay, I thought I made those. I tried to make connections like that. Like this is this person in the Peter Jackson movies. So like the big bearded guy who actually looks like John Rhys Davies is actually the Sean Bean dead meat character in The Lord of the Rings, right? And
Yes.
Gimli doesn't look like anybody, but that's who John Rhys Davies
Right.
is.
Yeah, Gimli doesn't.
Got it.
Gimli doesn't get a ton of screen time in this movie.
No. The Gollum, though, I was surprised, looked a lot like the Andy Serkis version of.
Yeah.
So yeah, that tracked.
Aragorn, the Lord Aragorn from Rivendell, also looked a lot like the character, or I should say the character in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. His Lord Elrond looked a lot like the Lord Elrond in this.
Okay.
So there were a few really, I guess, poignant connections, but
I remember the elf lady Galadriel, I think that's the name, right? Looks nothing like Liv Tyler, but I was okay with that because I don't care if Liv Tyler's.
Well, she's different. Liv Tyler played a different character,
See,
not Galadriel.
Galadriel is Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
Okay, I had it wrong. Okay, good. So, all right, I'm connecting all these, and what I realized, and I watched this twice, y'all, for this review because I felt like of the 3 of us, I was definitely the one that had the least amount of connection to any of this. So I wanted to get as much as I could. And at one point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to break down and read the books. And then we decided to record it like really soon. And I was like, nope, that's not going to happen. So I was like, all right, how could I? So I like listened to like crash courses on this, like while I was on runs and stuff. I got enough that I felt like I sort of figured it out. But I watched this twice. And what I realized the second time through was I cannot try to make connections between this and the Peter Jackson movies too much because I'll drive myself nuts. Because there's definitely like threads through, and obviously the story is mostly tracks across. But if I was sitting there and go like, now which one is that again? I'm gonna lose like what's happening because I was like, what? Wait a minute, they broke into song. When did that happen? I don't remember that, and I'm trying to keep up with that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Hobbits have big hairy feet. I don't remember that, but okay, I can see it with Sean Astin, sure. And I had to make myself stop doing that, halfway through the movie at some point.
So would you
I'm
guys?
so glad you came along for this ride, Jay.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is going to be fun.
oh yeah, no,
Um,
it is a long running thing to find something to review that I haven't seen 40 times. So I'm happy here. This is fun. I had to do actual homework. I like this.
so one of the reasons, Jay, why I feel like this you get this film confused with The Secret of Nim is that Secret of Nim also has a lot of rotoscoping in it.
Okay, I did not realize that. Okay.
Yeah, and same with another Don Bluth movie because he did Secret of Nim, An American Tail
Yes,
also
yes.
has a lot of rotoscoping in it.
Don Bluth got a thing
And
with
Does it
mice, by
really?
the way.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. I loved. Oh, you know what? I liked Five O Goes West more. So I don't think that had a ton of rotoscoping in it.
no, it did not because they were much less
Yeah.
ambitious, and he also had a little bit more money. Um,
Let's
primarily, one of the main reasons why people use rotoscoping, other than stylistic, is that they don't have the money to do the thing the way they wanted to do it. So
hmm
this is the way they get around it. Like that's the whole reason why Wizards, the battle scenes in Wizards, are just rotoscoped World War II footage that Ralph Bakshi used. Because
so
like,
rotoscoping, as I understand it, is you're basically animating something that you've shot against a plate or a background of some word, right? Like, and then you go back and cell by cell animate the figure or the person or the thing, right?
yes,
What
basically
a
you're just animating over top of live action footage. Um,
I cannot imagine the painstaking process that would be frame to frame to frame. Because the thing about this, I don't care how old this movie is, it looks amazing. Like to know
Yeah.
that that was the process. Because in 1976, when they were making this, I imagine you couldn't. There's no way to automate that, right? Like that's done by people. That's like little, Tim Burton's, type out there that are doing this kind of stuff.
I mean, funny enough, Tim Burton worked on this movie.
I did not know that.
hmm
Wow. Okay. I
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a little bit.
yeah, but lots of
okay.
people worked on this movie a little bit because it took forever.
But it does
Yeah.
give it like a very distinct style. Like again, like you said, Secret and M and American Tail have the same sort of style to them, and it does make it stand out in a way that maybe traditional animation wouldn't.
Yeah, it's used a lot in heavy metal,
Ah,
the
yeah,
movie, and
yeah.
also a couple great music videos. The Dire Straits Brothers in Arms video and the Aha Take on Me video were both like that's rotoscoping all over.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, is that what Money for Nothing is too? And their little rotoscoping in that when he's playing guitar?
Yes, there's a
Okay.
little rotoscoping in that, and there's some really early computer graphics, which is
Yeah, oh yeah,
fun.
the blocky people are also known as the After Last Season graphics for those who have partaken. But anyway,
Jay's gonna keep pushing that movie till at least 5 people in this audience watch it more
I
than
mean,
us.
I think I've probably got that many people to do it already. I mean, I corrupted two of you already.
It's true.
My goal
And
is to get Lindsey's Brian to watch it. That's my ultimate goal. If he'll sit down
It's
to that for 90 minutes, then
if you do that, he will never be on the podcast
he
again.
probably will never talk to me
And,
again.
and Lindsey will probably be banished to, I don't know, the garage or the carport or like a
no,
closet
No, that can
somewhere
get blamed
for
on
her
we have
me
recording.
wholeheartedly. So,
no. I can there's plenty of places I can record. It's fine.
but back,
Another fun
yeah.
rotoscoping fact for you, Jay.
hmm
Rotoscoping was the technique that Francis Ford or Martin Scorsese used to remove the big chunk of cocaine out of Neil Young's nose in The Last Waltz.
Okay, well that makes sense too. So,
So he went. So someone had to go in and digitally erase, or I guess physically draw over this big hunk of blow that's in Neil Young's nose throughout that whole his whole
oh,
performance in that movie.
holy cow!
That's wild. I had no
And if you
idea.
watch it in HD
Yeah.
now, they should have just left the cocaine in because it would have been less obnoxious and
Oh,
distracting.
I can only imagine. It's like the caked on makeup in the original Star Trek. If you go back and watch that on Paramount Plus, I mean, it's fun, but you can also tell like that was something not meant for HD. They've cleaned it up, like if you own the Blu-rays and stuff, but not on the streaming transfer. Right? They're just like, yep, whatever, and you can see it. But The thing though, again, I'll go back to it. Like I was saying, the style of this is not only the gimmick of it, and I get it for budgetary reasons. You don't have the money to shoot a Napoleon scene because this battle at Helm's Deep is, huge, even for what it was. But it does give this like a neat style. It almost reminds me too of like 80s arcade games and stuff. And there's one, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like it's partially animated, but it's also rotoscoped where it was almost impossible to play too. You have to slay this dragon and you're on this little cartoon character, but you just get wiped out all the time. I lost a lot of quarters in that game. But it may have been even been called Dragon Slayer or something like that. But it reminds me of that kind of thing. And I don't know. But it put me in a mood like immediately when it comes on, that and that score is tremendous. And I don't know this conductor from anything that I knew of apparently, but apparently he did a little bit of work on Star Trek 4 because some of the music from this winds up in that. And especially when they're like doing whale stuff. And I was like, oh, I knew I had heard it before. So it immediately put me in like oh, this is a time of high adventure, but you just in this animated world.
The game you're probably thinking about, Jay, is Dragon's Lair. And funny
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
Dragon's Lair is also like a Don Bluth game. Like he was
Wow.
involved in the animation of that. So we just tied it all back together.
See,
That's
yeah,
cool.
it all goes back to when Pizza Hut was actually a place you went and sat in, y'all. And
Now tie it to Kevin Bacon.
we were, oh, that can be done. Just hold on. I'll work on that. No problem. So I'll let my brain do that now. As I'm trying to keep up with who's Saruman, who's Sauron, who's Almarad. I gave up on names. I knew who Frodo was. I knew who Sam was. I gave up on names at one point though, because I was like, they'll just look at each other and I'll know the good one and the bad one. Like I what's it like to try to read that in text? It's one thing to hear it. I can't imagine reading that on a page.
I think I don't remember. I feel like at some point, because the names are repeated so many times, you just figure out like it honestly might be easier because you see how each name is spelled as it's going. So to hear it, like Sauron and Saruman sound really similar. In fact, for this film, they were going to change the name of Saruman to Aruman because I don't know. I guess they felt like that would be better, but then at the last minute decided to switch it back to Saruman. So there are still a few scenes in this movie where they missed a spot and didn't add the Saruman back in. So they'll call him Aruman in a couple of scenes.
By the way, I want to circle back. Here's the tie to Kevin Bacon. Dom DeLuise was the voice of one of the characters in Secret and M. He was in the Cannonball Run movies with Burt Reynolds, who was in Deliverance with John Voight. Burt Reynolds was with Demi Moore in Striptease, and Demi Moore and Kevin Bacon were together in A Few Good Men. So there you go.
Nice.
I knew I would get it. I had to think about it for a minute, but there we go.
Excellent.
I can play Six
So,
Degrees
yeah.
of Kevin Bacon. I can't tell you the different people in this movie though. But it doesn't
I
matter.
think it's probably easier to
Yeah.
read it.
I could
Yeah.
buy that, and that's what I figured too. But I'll say this too, for somebody like me, again, at one point I realized like it doesn't matter because the story is working either way. And
Yeah.
so Lindsay, all that exposition that you put out at the front, I'm glad you put that because it goes by so quick that's one of the reasons I had to watch this twice because like, now wait a minute, how did all this start again? And it goes by really quickly. I'm like, that seems like a really interesting story. So do they ever like tell that story more detailed in the book about here's all the rings and how they got doled out and how he got them back and all that stuff?
They do, and I think Peter Jackson allows himself a little more time, so it's also spelled out a little more in depth in those films, which my Brian has seen one and a half of, and he started this one with me, and I was thinking, this might actually be good for him because it's a way more abridged version. 2 movies in one instead of, one book and 2 movies. And he fell asleep. So I don't think he was super into it. But before he fell asleep, he did ask me the same question about the rings and how they were forged or what was what. And he had also seen both. So it must go
That
by quick.
that's some shady Faustian deal that Sauron's got going on. It's like, I'm gonna give you all these magic rings, but I'm gonna have the one that controls them all. Mwah. And I'm like,
Well,
wow.
Sauron didn't give them the magic ring.
Oh,
Sauron learned how to forge a
oh,
magic ring and forged a magic ring to bind all of the other magic rings together.
oh. So he's like Matthew Broderick in War Games when he learned how to work Falcon's machine better than the guy that programmed it. I got it. Okay, deal. Matthew Broderick is Sauron. Done.
Yeah.
So I'm
Well,
in.
and that's in so that and I'm speaking in context of this movie, which is
Right,
a
right.
little different from the lore of the books and the Peter Jackson films. But in
Okay.
the context of this movie, that is the background.
But I think that's fine as shorthand. Like that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like I can buy that. Like it
Hmm.
works and everything. What I have question about is I got how Bilbo Baggins found this ring or whatever, but why did he just give it away? Because the wizard told him to. I don't understand that whole
Well, he'd
dynamic.
had the ring for several decades at that point,
Okay.
and I think he knew that it was bad for him because he had met Gollum in the Hobbit story. Um, so I think deep down Bilbo knew that it was a bad ring to have, and ultimately he was never going to be able to keep it. So when Gandalf told him he had to give it away, he was reluctant, but decided to
So
anyway.
so Ron, is the ring kind of like the monkey's paw? Like you want it, but then when you have it, you wish you'd never seen it?
The ring corrupts.
Okay.
It grants incredible power, but it also corrupts.
So,
So that's one of the reasons why
okay.
Gollum goes from being a hobbit, because Gollum's a hobbit. I
Yeah.
don't know if you realize that. And he turns into this like deformed little monster man who has lived for hundreds of years
Yeah.
thanks to the power of the ring, but it has
Okay.
made him like obsessed with the ring.
Yeah.
Right. That
Well,
I
and
remember.
just
Yeah.
not to correct, but in case we're having other Lord of the Rings nerdy kids listening, Gollum technically wasn't a hobbit. He was like a pre-hobbit hobbit.
Okay.
So
So he's like
a
really old.
hobbit-ish creature. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He
So
like predates hobbits.
okay, I kind of got that idea. Like I
Ooh.
felt like him and his friend were almost like a Cain and Abel sort of situation from the Book of Genesis too. There's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, a
But
little of that.
I
You're
mean,
getting your Tolkien confused with your C.S. Lewis, Jay.
I mean, probably so. I've actually never read any C.S. Lewis, thank goodness. But I'm getting it confused with Felt Bible School. And Ron knows exactly what I'm talking about. But
Mhm.
but no, I'm following all of that. But if you, my question is this: if you know the ring corrupts, right? Like Bilbo knows this, and so
Mhm.
that's why on earth would you ever give it to someone else that you cared about? Because presumably he cares about Frodo, and because they're related, right? It's his nephew.
I think he trusts Gandalf
Okay.
to know, and he also seals it in an envelope. So, and this movie's a little bit different too. So Frodo doesn't really touch the ring at all after it's given to him.
Oh.
But in this movie, so this is where one of the differing points in this movie, it makes it look like Frodo's just been carrying the ring around with him the whole time.
Right, yeah, because when he throws it in the fire, he like starts freaking out about it because
Yeah.
and Gandalf's like, already, you know? And I was like, oh, this thing must work quick on you.
Yeah. But normally, and for some reason, and they talk about this, it's discussed in the books and I think the Peter Jackson films that hobbits show this weird amount of resilience to the ring, like more than other races in Middle Earth. So it affects them, but not as quickly as it does the humans or the elves, the dwarves, etc.
Okay, cool.
I guess it's because like hobbits are kind of like the simple country bumpkin of the
Yeah, they're the most wholesome.
They
yeah.
are super wholesome. I was going to
Mhm.
ask, like, they seem to be like every day is hee haw. You know,
All they want is like some food and like a place to
Beer,
dance and some pipe weed, and
that
and they
you're in
want to
good
grow
shape.
plants. Yeah.
they are very much like the embodiment of the Dave Matthews Band lyric, eat and drink and be merry, you know, for tomorrow we may die. But they don't seem to be really upset about that.
They are. That's my
Yeah.
life's goal, is to just live like a hobbit.
I mean, there are worse goals to have, so I'm down
Hmm.
for this.
The
I
only
like
problem
it.
is you got to get the bottoms of your feet all leathery so you can just walk around barefoot all the
Lindsey runs
time.
marathons. They
I
probably
know.
already are.
Okay,
I
that's
was
fair.
like, I was like, already gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm halfway there. They're not hairy, nor will they ever be, I hope. But
Hey,
But
that might not have been hair. That might have just been decades of like impacted dirt,
maybe.
and
that
it just looks like hair because their feet are just
the
stained
feet,
dingy.
the feet, like I did get a little like Peanuts Pigpen situation off of that.
Yeah.
Like they're just little cute things. That's the one thing I think I got from this that it would be hard to do with real actors. And I know they did a lot of, apple boxing and scaling and all that stuff in the Jackson movies, but you definitely got the size differentials from all of these people, that the hobbits were these little things, and the elves were these tall, elegant, beautiful creatures, and that, Gandalf was this towering, power presence there. I got all of that from this. Now, and I think that's something that animation lends itself to. You can make those grand distinctions.
Yeah. I think the only time, and I was looking for it. So this is just a quick fact. I had never heard the term rotoscoping before today. So I didn't know what to call it, but now I do. So I can use my words. But with the exception, sometimes the rotoscoping was a little funny to see the size differences in
Hmm.
everybody. But
Yeah.
also, going back to the pantless thing, it did look like the actors who were being rotoscoped for the pantless Boromir, and apparently the men, the human males, are just pantless in this world.
I kind of got like this whole like maybe they were wearing like the ballet tight situation, and they just didn't have another way of differentiating
Flesh-colored tights.
stuff.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I was giving the movie a lot because I had to deal with pantsless, as I said, dark-haired He-Man,
I
and
just thought it was a bold choice to be
it
pantless.
it
I wasn't
is.
really
I mean,
sure where
especially
that
when you're going to fight with swords like that. That may not be the
I didn't remember that bit from this movie when I
no.
was watching it and he came out. I
I,
was like, "That your feet are up on the table, sir, and you have
yeah,
no pants on."
yeah. At a bar. It doesn't look terribly sanitary, sir, but okay. Um, I d- I got a kick out of the whole pub sequence though, because it revealed a lot about the hobbits and sort of how
Mhm.
they go, and when Frodo breaks into song with his friends
Yep.
and they automatically just break into song behind him. That was a lot of fun. But Aragorn seemed to be like very concerned that they were going to blow their cover because he
Yeah.
knew danger was on the way. Now, I missed it, so even seeing it twice, how did he know that? Or was it just happenstance that he happened to be there and run across them?
He planned to be there because he's friends with Gandalf, and
Oh,
I
okay.
think Gandalf, at least in this movie, the storyline that he gave was that Gandalf had asked them to be there, or he had been waiting to hear from Gandalf, hadn't heard from Gandalf, was very concerned because that's never happened.
Right,
And this was an agreed upon meeting place.
right.
Um, so he kind of knew the story. Also, he's a well-known tracker, so that's one of his, if we're gonna go the He-Man route, that's one of his superpowers, is being able to
Okay.
track people.
That's fair. I can buy that. In a land of
And he knew
wizards
that the
and
ring
stuff.
wraiths, yeah, he knew that the
Yeah.
ring wraiths were out and about, so
So I like that you explained what the ring wraiths were because I was doing like before they ripped the mask off and it's old Mr. Johnson, like some serious Scooby-Doo vibes off of that.
yeah.
And not in a bad way, but I was like, ooh, yeah, this is like some of that electric monster action from the
Mhm.
Scooby-Doo cartoon back in the day.
Yeah, they were kind of electric monsters in this. And they're really, like, creepy and oily and gross in the Peter Jackson ones. I don't know how much. I don't know. When was the last time you watched the other
When they were
Lord
in
of the Rings?
theaters. I've never seen the extended version, so when it was in
Okay,
theaters. So yeah.
gotcha.
I in my head was remembering one thing, but I realized later in the Peter Jackson ones, I was thinking of what the orcs were. So I don't remember.
Yeah, ring wraiths are taller and skeletal and immortal. Like
Okay.
they're really more like zombie ghosts.
Yeah, ring wraiths
Yeah.
have more magic and stuff, and the orcs are just goons.
Yeah.
So the ring race are after the one this ring because it's the
Mhm.
one ring, right? It's
Yep.
the ring, which is like the ultimate Horcrux. They use some Harry Potter
Yeah.
logic. Okay, that's how I made it work in my head at least. I was like, it's J.K. Rowling obviously ripped this off, which fine, everybody rips each other off. It's homage when you're an artiste, but but I mean, really, that's what that came across as, and it felt like Dementors were an allegory for or a parallel to ring wraiths.
You definitely strike a line between dementors and ring wraiths.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
the worst part about prison is the Dementors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought I would channel my "Tis the Podcast" there for a minute.
Yeah, that's totally available and fine in this
Which
context.
we're
Yeah.
officially feuding with them because they did that Lindsay Lohan little secret Christmas movie
Oh
that I
Ew.
yeah.
Did
told
they?
Anthony that they needed to do,
Yeah.
and they did invite me on, even though Tom wasn't there. So
Oh,
we're on the outs.
okay. Well, we're
Knife. We're gonna have a knife fight.
we're is,
Wow.
are
We're
we
gonna
the
sharpen
sharks
some.
are we the sharks or the jets in this scenario? I don't know.
Oh man.
Ew.
Well, I don't want to be the Jets because I want to win, and so they might
In any
be.
context, that is accurate, by the
Yeah.
way. Fair. So my question to both of you then is, I know he's an all-powerful wizard, but apparently he has a boss too. What is Gandalf's like jurisdiction in this whole like world? Is he the governor? Like, what is his deal?
He's basically he's people, and this may be a thing that they did in the Silmarillion or one of the other like associated ephemera books that Tolkien put out. But he's basically like an angel.
Okay, that was not where I thought you were going.
Yeah.
Okay,
So and he just kind
That's a
of
really good way to put it. Yeah.
okay, all right.
and I don't remember if he serves a specific master or not. I've forgotten that part. I don't think so. But
Not really.
him and the other beings like him are just basically like if everyone else was normal and there were like 8 Supermans,
Okay,
because
so
it's like him, it's like Radagast the Brown, um
but
Saruman the White.
the
Saruman the
one he
White.
goes to see in this is Saruman, but
Yes.
who he realizes has been turned evil by the influence of the
Yeah.
ring and Sauron, right?
Yeah. And I guess so Gandalf doesn't have a boss, but he is like a servant for good. He's trying
Okay.
to set the world right again, knowing that this ring of power is out there. So it's him and a handful of other people. Galadriel is one of them, who were there like when the ring was forged.
Right. They had that whole thing where like there's that round table going on that seemed like a flashback or something. And I remember that scene in the Jackson movie too, but it was here too. And I was like, oh, that's it. The first time I saw it, I was like, that seems really out of context. But the second time I was like, oh, that's a flashback. I got it. Okay. That made sense because it told me who all those other people were, all of a sudden. And that a lot of them, the thing that I kept going back to is like everybody in this story is really a lot older than they look. Like everybody's got years on them and you don't realize it. Like
Yeah.
that's interesting to
Well,
me.
there, with the exception of the humans, with the exception of Aragorn, we'll get to that in a minute. But the elves are immortal, but immortal in the sense that they can't die from like disease or famine or heart attack, anything like that. They can, however, be killed in battle. So if they get an arrow to the heart, like they're not so immortal that they won't succumb to injuries from that. Man-made injuries they can die from, but they're not susceptible to any other kind of disease or anything like that. So they live for centuries, millennia. They live as long as they live. Aragorn / Strider is part of the Dunedain, which is it's like a race of humans that have extraordinary long life. So Aragorn is actually somewhere around the age of mid-80s,
Okay.
even though he looks like he's 30, 40s.
Yeah, he's the fit version of Danny Trejo.
Yeah, super
So,
fit.
yeah.
Sounds like Jack LaLanne.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Well, that tracks back to the Jack Palance because Jack
It
Palance was doing
does.
the one-arm push-ups when he was 80 years old.
And winning Oscars. Yeah, exactly. So that tracks. But he's human or humanoid. And
He's
so is
human.
Boromir, who gets arrowed to death, like
Yeah, he
jacked.
really does.
Like I was like, man,
Yeah.
they jacked that dude up bad. We'll get to that. But so I'm like, okay, so there are like humans in this among all this other creature and such.
And hobbits have a shorter lifespan. Hobbits are not immortal, but Bilbo lived well into his hundreds, and which isn't super uncommon for hobbits, I don't think, but because Bilbo had the ring, he lived for an extraordinary amount of time.
Now, did Bilbo, and this is probably unrelated to the movie, but did Bilbo die or did Bilbo just go off into the West?
Well,
Where
Bilbo,
all the
well,
other people went to go be immortal.
yeah. So Bilbo went to Rivendell. When he left Rivendell, it's kind of the same as dying. But I think you're right. I don't really know the answer to that.
Because in the
Do
movie,
we
he just
really?
bails.
Any of us know the answer to that question when we get on the boat to cross that final river?
That's very like I feel like I need to put on the Endless River for Pink Floyd and contemplate that now for a while, Lindsay. Thanks. But
You're welcome.
I mean, no, that's okay. I'll be thinking about that all night now. But I got the idea that Bilbo went off to was going away and wasn't coming back. But he wasn't necessarily dying. He was just transitioning to the next stage. Like that was how that all came across. Because I love the way he does it. Like he does with the stuff like, "I like you all, but I don't like you very much. I'm going to leave now. Bye." And I was like, "Wow, that's the Irish exit, but sort of the loud version." But that's okay.
It's a loud version, the
version.
loudest version of an Irish goodbye I have ever seen.
Well, it also played a little bit like Jerry Stiller in Seinfeld. Is the way that I read that character. Like he would have a Festivus.
And yes,
Yeah.
before we go any further, Frodo did go to the Undying Lands with Elrond, Celeborn, Galadriel, Gandalf, and Bilbo.
That's
or,
like
and
the
Frodo,
sixth
excuse me.
ending of the Peter Jackson movies that we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, they all
So,
basically.
cross the river Styx into whatever.
Who's the dude in the Bible who just like walked into heaven one day and didn't die?
That's Elisha.
Yeah. So
yeah.
they just did that,
Mhm.
except they took a boat. They didn't have
Oh
to walk.
man, and Elijah Wood played Frodo.
Ooh. So
Now
Coincidence? I think not.
now we're getting into some deep stuff. Yeah, but I think all these things borrow from each other. Like
All
I
right.
can buy that completely. It's a neat idea. I so I'm along for the journey here. I'm seeing what's happening. When the ring wraiths attack, how does Frodo know if he puts the ring on, he's invisible to everybody else, but he can see the ring wraiths better? Is that what happens there when he gets in a sword fight with them? Because he got some balls to do that.
He doesn't know, I don't think. He puts the ring on to hide, and I think it's more the ring puts itself on him.
Okay.
So it's almost like a magnet. So we see it in the first scene where the ring wraiths almost catch them before the hobbits get to Bree. And you see him the ring is poised to get put on his finger. And then he gets into this kind of trance. And Peter Jackson's does the same thing really in his as well. But he gets into this kind of trance and then he gets knocked out of it a little bit, remembers, puts the ring back in his pocket, and then the ring wraiths lose the scent. So I don't know if Frodo is aware that that's what happens at that point. I think the ring is just almost magnetic, like it has to be put on. And then once he gets it on, the ring wraiths are like ready to roll.
Okay, because that was a really intense sequence.
Hmm.
And again, for like, quote, an animated children's story, which this is not that necessarily, but let's just, you could just on the surface to say that I was impressed by the delicate dance of the violence in this. Like I did not
Yeah.
expect to see cartoons getting shanked, and I was like, wow, that I didn't remember that at all. I remember Frodo like got attacked and like got sick and all that stuff from the other movies and stuff, but I didn't remember the whole bit about the blade like breaking off in him and that's just keeping to poison him. Like that's actually a pretty smart little device too.
Yeah. And Ron, you mentioned earlier, didn't you say for some of these scenes they used World War II footage?
That was for Ralph Bakshi's previous movie, Wizards.
Okay. They
Where
used
they,
some kind of I can't remember. I feel like I read that somewhere that they used some footage from
they
something. I'm being
they
very
they did use
expletive.
well, they've used he took Ralph Bakshi took footage of the actors dressed as orcs leaving the set to go get lunch and used it without their knowledge or permission.
That is some Bowfinger like filmmaking, by
Yeah,
the
so
way.
there's a certain point where there's just a bunch of orcs like wandering off. They're going to get lunch. And he was like, I'm gonna put this in my movie for reasons.
Well, I mean, I guess if you don't have time and if your producers argue with you, I'm sure he's wanting you to finish this thing quicker than you're ready to. So you got to shoot everything and then figure it
Yeah.
out later, right? So any movement gets filmed and then we figure it out later.
I mean,
Kubrick
it
was
worked.
notorious for that. Kubrick just filmed stuff all the time and then would stick it in a movie, just like a 1 second scene. And people are like, when did I film that? You don't remember. That was Stanley's madness. But yeah.
And if you're a trauma movie, you film one car exploding and you use it 8 to 10 times.
Yes, of course. So, because we got to be economical. Or if you're Golden Globus, you blow it all on the candy and the one explosion in the middle of the movie, and then you have to come up with a climax afterward. But
So for because podcasting is a video medium, Jay did finger quotes for candy. So
yes.
that way you know it's implied that it's
Hey, we have
cocaine.
a very popular YouTube channel that has, no video element to it, but that's okay. Thanks for
Maybe
subscribing.
someday.
Thank you for
But that
subscribing.
would require us to be video ready, which
I the amount of
is so
times
much
we have
work.
been video ready. Well, I can count like twice. Lindsay like dressed up for Howard the Duck, which was on
That's true.
point.
During
And
the
then
pandemic, I
yeah,
had to entertain myself more
yes,
than
yes,
anything. So I did
true.
do dress up days for all of our podcasts that
Yeah, and I think I
we did
dressed up for
then.
something once that I wore a shirt that like was whatever we were talking about. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm not camera ready ever. So face made for radio, as they said back in the day. But anyway,
Now, if you do go to the archives of our YouTube channel, there are a few film strip lives that have been backed up from
the,
when we were doing
also yeah, during the
video
pandemic,
content. Then we realized, oh God, we're so ugly. We
we're
can't
not
do
gonna
this
do that
to
anymore.
to
Yeah, we're
people
not.
or ourselves.
I don't recommend people view those, but do go listen to our old episodes there. And leave us comments because somebody left us like a really nice comment disagreeing with what we were talking about on Jennifer's body, but it was very like thoughtful and it wasn't flame worthy at all. I'm like, oh gosh, it's like the early days of social media when we all loved each other, you know?
I like a constructive disagreement. I'm
Yes,
always here for
it
it.
was very good. I enjoyed that. But speaking of constructive
Now that you
disagreement,
said that, Jay, people are going to drop into that episode and just leave strings of
I mean,
racial and ethnic slurs
I
because it's
have,
YouTube.
well, and I'm the fool that has to monitor this. So maybe YouTube does a good job with that. We'll see. We'll find out.
You
Maybe they
just
won't.
you just click a couple buttons and they go away
I
permanently.
mean,
So
yeah,
that's not a big deal.
we'll click some more buttons. Speaking of clicking buttons and finding thematic ways back to the story, so Frodo gets stabbed
Hmm.
in the fight, and he's sick, and they they immediately realize like we have to take him to what's the name of the place where the elves are from? Not Riverdale.
Rivendell.
Rivendell. I knew I was
Rivendell.
going to do that. Not Riverdale. God, I hope you don't change Riverdale. That place is messed up. So that's more messed up than where the ring race come from. But yeah,
Yeah,
they take him to Rivendell.
instead of Archie, Betty, and Veronica, it's Galadriel and Arwen and
Elrond.
Elrond. Yeah,
All being super emo about dating each other
Aragorn
and
is
murdering each
Jughead.
other.
So I don't think Galadriel is in Rivendell. Galadriel is in their next stop.
Yeah,
Okay, but they go to Rivendell, which is where we catch up with the Anthony Daniels Legolas character,
Yes.
right? And I love
Well,
how
Legolas they catch up with just a little bit before, but yes.
okay, but they're on the way
goes
to
with
Rivendell.
them, yeah, to Rivendell.
And he's the one that tells Sam, "You need to chill. We got to get your friend to the hospital," basically, because
Yeah.
Sam is like uber defensive of Mr. Frodo. And so, who is he to Frodo? Like his best friend, cousin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Best friend. They may be cousins, but they're
I think he's just best friend, and Merry and Pippin are his cousins.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's also Hobbiton. Everyone's probably somebody's cousin.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
small town.
That's fair. I'm probably related to everybody I grew up with too in Florence, so I get that. That's fine. But I don't know. I remembered a little bit of that from the Peter Jackson movies, but it was so obvious here. Like Sam was like super protective of Frodo, and everybody else seems to just go like, "Oh, that's sweet and cute," but we've got to take him to the hospital because he got stabbed by like magical sword stuff. So
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great that you're protective of your friend and all, but we really need to get him out into the hospital because he has a piece of a shank stuck in his neck.
yeah,
It's that kind of
Yeah.
deal.
that was why you would choose not that. I'm not going to judge anybody's beliefs, so do what you do. But no, I like that whole little bit though, and I didn't know that was Anthony Daniels until I saw it in the credits because it doesn't sound like Anthony Daniels, and I don't really know him outside of C-3PO and the interviews he's done. I'm sure he's done a lot of great acting work that I've just never watched, but I didn't know that was him, and so that was kind of a neat little treat. I was like, oh,
Which
cool.
is cool. That's kind of a
hmm
testament to his voice acting prowess. He can
hmm
come up with all kinds of different characters. I love when, especially in those old like 90s Nickelodeon cartoons, they'd have one voice actor do like 5 different characters.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it was so
Like,
fun to, like hear them piece it all together and come up with all these different little characters.
like Mel Blanc was the my reference point for that for years with Looney Tunes, and I think modern day would be like Seth MacFarlane. Like his ability to
Yeah.
switch between people
Well,
is
It would
unbelievable.
But
be
you always know
It would be
Seth
Billy
MacFarlane.
West.
Billy West.
It would have to be Billy West.
Okay, all right, but I like the move. Like again, for a over 2 hour movie and a lot going on, it's moving along pretty economically. Like we're getting places, and stuff happens. There's no point in this where I feel like it lagged. And I suppose it didn't really have time to because it's trying to jam 2 books into one movie, which is a lot.
Yeah.
So I did read a little bit behind the scenes about the writers and the way they were credited. Like the first writer had like multiple drafts of this and stuff, and then the second one came in and like stripped it out even more, and then Bakshi took a run at it, and like so many people like had a hand in writing this as they tend to do. But my question though is, I know the voice acting's happening. Are the actors that are the voices of these people, are they the rotoscoped people too, or are those just stand-ins?
I think the rotoscoped people are just stand-ins.
Yeah, the rotoscope people are mostly just stand-ins.
Okay, that's even wow. That's even more impressive.
In the original movie, none of them were credited, and that
Oh,
became a whole big deal.
yeah, because it'd be like David Prowse. It'd be like if James Earl Jones, you thought James Earl Jones was in the Darth Vader
Mhm.
suit. Nope. So I mean,
And I actually, if you look up, because I did this earlier, I was looking for a specific, I can't even remember why or who, a specific actor in this. And when I looked up actors in 1978 Lord of the Rings, the first thing that popped up was no actors were credited in the 1978 Lord of the Rings. I had to specify voice actors in 1978 Lord of the
okay.
Rings.
Which
That
is weird because the guy doing the stand-in for the Hobbits is the most famous little person actor of all time, Billy Barty.
No, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
and when there's two hobbits together, the other person is played by. There's a couple different little people in there, but Billy Barty's the most famous one. And yeah, he's Bilbo.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense then. Okay. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know that they weren't one of the same. So they did all that on totally on the back end with the recording. That's impressive. Because it matches so well. Like, animations, that's hard to do. And that I don't know, it's well done. So I was impressed by all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Everything was
well
good.
done. It looks great. It looks you instantly know what you're looking at.
Right.
I feel like they were able to do a lot with a fairly small physical cast
Hmm.
in terms of like having interesting looking battle sequences.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about because I guess the next thing is when they go to the area that's like all the mines and stuff where Gandalf is gonna fight the lion Satan creature thing or whatever.
Balrog.
Balrog.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't remember the name of it. Lion Satan creature. They were going to do that. But I loved that because I remember you shall not say. Who can forget that from the Peter Jackson movies? But I kind of like the way it played in this a little different. I don't know. It was different, and I liked that. And I don't know how close one is to the book or the other, but just as a scene. Like there was a lot of action in that, and it was cool. And I bought it when he told the story later about both of them going down into the depths of whatever hell thing that is. That like he sort of gets encompassed into things fire, but somehow that protects him too. It was a pretty badass story. I was like, man, Gandalf like is pretty awesome. Like that was cool. I had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but when I first saw this movie post college, I was told that the reason why it took so long for someone to make a live action Lord of the Rings was specifically because the technology did not exist to make a convincing Balrog. And
Mhm.
because that thing played such a pivotal, like, was such a pivotal plot point in the movie because it's the thing that, allegedly kills Gandalf, it had to be in there. But there was just nothing that existed that could convincingly make it outside of animation, and then we
Yeah.
got CGI,
That's
and
that's fascinating. I've never heard that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
again, don't know if that's true, but I was not able to corroborate it via any other kind of search, but I also didn't look that hard, to be fair, so
But I mean
if
that's
anyone
that's
else out there knows, feel
I
free
could
to
buy
ping
that
us.
though, because like again, George Lucas said for years the reason he had prequel story ideas, he just didn't feel like he could make them because the
Mhm.
technology didn't exist. So to make what he felt like that world looked like versus what we already knew from Star Wars, so I can buy that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, when Boromir tries to jank the ring off Frodo, which I know is a couple scenes ahead of this or whatever, but when is it because like he's being corrupted by it too, or
Yeah.
was he always bad and he because I didn't know how to read it. Like, was he a plant or did he just like succumb to its dark essence or whatever?
He succumbed to the dark essence,
Okay,
essentially, but humans, I guess I
yeah.
should say, not specifically men, could be women too. I'm not sexist here. They Humans succumb to the power a lot faster, it
Okay.
seems, in
See
Yeah,
this
the way
world.
which is
yeah.
why the nine ring wraiths are the nine humans who have
Yeah.
rings of power.
Oh, see, I didn't catch that. Oh, that makes so much
Yeah.
more sense now. Okay, because I recently rewatched Nosferatu, the new one, the Robert Eggers version. So it was in my head, and I was like, "Oh, this is very much like the way Nosferatu works, and the Dracula story too, but the seducing of people. But it's like
Mhm.
it's almost in your head to begin with too. Again going back to some of the biblical allegory stuff. It's like you're sort of some people are not. I won't say predisposed, but like you're tempted by what you already want anyway, and you
Yeah.
just turn it to 11, and then all of a sudden, and now you're in real trouble.
It kind of whispers to you, and I think some people just hear it louder.
Okay, I can buy that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially since he's so concerned about the survival of his people. And one of the
Hmm.
things they make pretty clear in this is that even though you may have the ring with good intentions, the ring itself does not have good intentions. So
Right.
whatever good you try to do with the ring will be corrupted into something bad.
Right. Right.
So he's
Okay.
like, "Give me the ring so I can save my people." And it's like, and this is good. It's literally like that monkey's paw you mentioned earlier, Jay. Like
Yeah.
that finger's gonna curl and something bad's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I need y'all to explain to me the Treebeard situation. So like I need to understand what I saw because I don't.
I love Treebeard. The ends were my favorite part of the books, and they're so many people's least favorite parts, so I can't explain why I like them so much, but Treebeard is like a tree herder, I think is how it's put, and he's just a really old alive tree. And there are other Ents or tree herders that exist, and they're really powerful, but they're very bureaucratic and they talk really slow because they're so old.
And because they live so long,
Yeah,
they don't have to make quick decisions because they
right.
have lifespans like trees. I've got a tree, I've got a weeping willow in my backyard that's, I don't know, 4 stories tall. That's like 90 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very old for a willow tree. So
Okay.
fingers crossed it doesn't fall down like the other one wanted to.
Yeah. And they're
But
not as affected by because they're not humanoid in any sense. So any decision they make isn't really like it may affect the lives of elves or humans or dwarfs, but it doesn't really affect them at all. So they kind of just mind their own business
So, but
for
it
the most
seemed to
part.
me that like Treebeard like provided a little bit of guidance and shelter to that group as they're cutting through the forest there.
He
yes,
did.
he does help Merry and Pippin
Okay.
in the forest because he is able to see the enemy that is, Sauron and Saruman and the orcs. They are deforesting his forests. So he's like, well, I can't just sit back and let this happen, even if it means I have to, you know, speed the decision making the process along to take only a couple of weeks instead of like 5 years, because they're
Mhm.
cutting down trees left, right, and they're cutting down trees at a rate to fuel their war machine that, um, will kill the forest before we would make our decision normally.
So why are all those groups like building up armies again? Who are they bringing those against is what I'm asking.
Uh, Elves, dwarves, and men.
Okay, so it's just gonna be one
Yeah.
collapse in the middle. Okay.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
the armies of the east, the orcs. There are some corrupted men, um, trolls. Uh, who else is in there, Lindsay?
Orcs, corrupted men, trolls, a wizard or two.
Yeah, like
I think that's pretty much everything. And then all of them work for Lord Sauron, who is basically just a giant eye thing.
And now I realize too that Ernest Klein totally ripped this off for Ready Player One at the end of that because that,
yes,
yeah, okay.
Mhm.
I'm not surprised because everything else, that whole story is an homage or a ripoff in other ways. But now yeah, and Spielberg did it too in the movie adaptation of it because that's what happens at the end of that, where John Hamm is the big bad guy. Um, or no, not John Hamm, Ben Mendelsohn. Yeah, he just looks like John Hamm as an animated cartoon.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, he does. I mean, uh, yeah. Okay, now,
But I think the main issue is, or the reason why the orcs and the men of the east are so easily corrupted is, I mean, you saw the land around Mount Doom. It's even when it was nice, it wasn't nice.
yeah, those were the
So
sides of the Monopoly board you skipped. So
yeah,
yeah,
so they're seeking resources. The classic thing of, if your neighbor's got a nice house, just go kick his door in and take it for yourself, kind of deal.
That sounds like
Yeah.
something in a story about bugs and asteroids and people that
Sounds
maybe
like
one
a
day we'll talk about.
sounds like a World War II allegory to me.
It does. It sounds like a lot of things, but they meet up back up with Gandalf at this point, right? Because we find out he went to hell with the hell demon thing and came back because
Came back.
as y'all described, he's more or less an angel anyway. So, um, okay,
Yeah.
I dug that. I, I like that. But th was it me or like he looked different too, right? Like he had okay, I didn't
He's
miss that.
supposed to. Yeah, it's almost like coming back from the dead.
Right.
It's a
Right.
rebirth. So he even has that line where they say Gandalf and he acts like he very vaguely remembers the name Gandalf.
Oh,
Like he
okay.
had briefly forgotten that that was his name
Mhm.
until Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli say Gandalf.
Okay. I kind of like that. The sort of
Mhm.
in the rebirth part, he would have to remember who he used to be.
Yeah. It's very like it's very, Lazarus, Jesus,
Yeah.
the the two, coming back from the dead stories biblically that I remember,
Hmm.
um but yeah, kind of like that.
So why does the king, Theoden, is that am I saying that right? Why does
Mhm.
he not want to like get involved or help? Is he trying to be Switzerland? Like,
Yeah, basically. Well, Grimble Wormtongue is his advisor, and in the movie he's bad because he's played by Chucky.
what? Yeah, Brad Dourif. Poor Brad Dourif. At
Brad
one time,
Dourif.
he played dramatic like leads and romantic leads, but then
Yeah,
Chucky came along
that
and
was a long
fine.
time ago.
Hey,
But
Heaven's
yeah,
Gate, people remember that.
yeah, Billy Babbitt has changed quite a bit since then. But yes,
Slightly.
he is corrupted by uh Sauron,
Okay.
and he's advising the king to stay Switzerland until it's too late for
Okay.
and then they'll just get rolled up like everyone else did,
Right.
essentially.
Okay.
And because Theoden is like hellaciously old,
Hmm.
it's he doesn't really have a hunger for battle anyway.
It's almost like Walter Frey and Game of Thrones to borrow that again.
No,
So
Walder Frey had a hunger for power. Theoden is more like Robert Baratheon, in which he just wants to be left alone to drink himself to death.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, fair.
Yeah.
All right. Got
The
it.
Yeah.
whoring is implied.
Okay.
And again, that digresses in this movie. It's a little different in both Peter Jackson and in the book.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I wasn't clicking entirely with it. I mean, I got it, like why he was doing. I just didn't understand
Mhm.
the reason for. Okay, y'all did a good job explaining it then. But I get the idea that Helm's Deep is like a great fortified position because the castle and the way it sits inside of the mountains and stuff. Because you got to come down, you got the high ground, Anakin, to get on people and stuff like that. And I got to say, I mean, for a limited budget and they don't have a ton of people, the battle sequence here is pretty awesome. Like that looked really cool. That was a lot of fun.
I liked the battle sequence. I didn't look into this. I mean, it looked like they had a bunch of people involved in that.
I mean, it looked like a
But I
large number,
agree,
but
it
not
looked
like
really good, yeah.
thousands or anything, like it just the way it was shot, it looked bigger than maybe it really was. But that's
Yeah.
all in the way it's done. So, and the score, again, I'll go back to that score from Leonard Rosenman is it really is driving a lot of things when the dialogue isn't happening or you don't need it. It's just a bunch of swords going around and horses and whatnot.
Yeah, the score was good. We, I think, need to thank the producer for that
Yes.
because, uh Bakshi did not want to have a traditional score for this film, not an
Right.
orchestral one. He wanted to have Led Zeppelin be a part of it. Led Zeppelin is, you may
They're
not know,
they,
a
you know,
big Lord of the Ring
I did know
fan.
that. I did know that. I'm not a big Zeppelin fan,
They
but I
write
did
it
know
into a
that.
lot of their songs. So,
Yeah, in
um,
Mountain Hop, like Misty Mountain Hop, one of their
hmm
yeah,
Yeah,
I remember
and
that when
Misty
you
yeah,
were
Mountain is
saying
one of the
that.
locations we see
Yeah,
in
when
this
you
movie.
said that in the plot summary, I immediately thought of that. I was like, oh, I remembered Led Zeppelin was a big Lord of the Rings fan. Well, Stairway to Heaven's a big
yeah. But can you imagine a Led Zeppelin score for this movie?
kind of can. It would, yeah, it would be a very
It would
different
be very
movie.
different.
Yeah. It's very 70s.
It's
Like
like it's like the Queen, how the Queen score for Highlander
Hellraiser. Yeah, Highlander. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of, Ron.
specifically marks it out as like, oh, this is like 1980 something.
It is very
Yeah.
1980 something, yeah. But it's also
Yeah.
cool, but it does mark that movie as you can't be anything but that. So
Yeah.
It's fun because
It would have been
Bakshi
different.
hated the score.
that's
Hmm.
wild. Oh God, it's so good. But I get it
He
if he
thought it
wanted.
was
He thought it was cheesy.
cliche, I
Yeah,
think is what,
cliche.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it worked.
I liked it too. I liked the
Yeah.
score too. I don't, this isn't on my rotation. I listened to the Howard Shore Lord of the
Mm,
Rings
that's
scores
an incredible
from,
score. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he does a beautiful job with that. But I liked, so I had that in mind as I
Mhm.
was watching this, but I agree. I like the score fine. I would love to see this movie with a Led Zeppelin score though.
That would be, I imagine someone has probably bothered to do at least scenes of it with some of this, like along the way, somewhere out there in video land, internet land. Link that to us, y'all, if you find it, because I would almost want to hear that too. At least this battle, like it would be cool. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard Led Zeppelin synced up to Marvel battle stuff now, so I might as well be thinking something they actually like, you know. It would be cool, but the battle's great though. It really, really works. Like I liked all of it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, why don't they kill Gollum though when they have the chance? Because he deserves it.
Pity.
Is that it? Okay.
Pity, and he knows a way to get them to Mount Doom without having to, wade through a shit ton of orcs.
Okay.
Mhm.
So he
Okay.
says.
No, I was gonna
So they
say,
kind of need him.
okay, that's fair. So, all right, because the movie, I know, like the version I watched on Apple TV or whatever, has like this thing that I read afterwards said was tacked on years later, where like they say like, and then evil was defeated, and thus is the story. Like they wrap it up, and but I understand that like in the original one, like it just ends and like to be continued, never is the
Well,
way it goes.
one of the things was Bakshi wanted them to call it part one, so that way
Okay.
people would expect the part two.
Oh, got it.
And Saul Zaentz was like, "No, if we call it a part one, people are going to get mad. We sold them half a movie." Little did he know that they
Yeah.
literally sell you half a movie every 6 months now with something or another.
Right, right.
Yep.
So, yeah. Well, I don't know. I again being very much the newbie on this, watching it this time and again watching it twice, both times when it ended, I was like, yeah, I know there's more to the story just because I know there is. But if I didn't know that, I'm like, okay, like I buy it. It worked.
I agree. So I didn't remember because it's been, I don't, over 10 years since I've seen this movie. But I couldn't remember how it ended, and I knew it only encompassed the first 2 books. So I was curious to see how they chose to end it. Like, how did they wrap it up to try to make it one succinct film? I was okay with it.
They did the time honored tradition of, let's just have a voiceover at the end. Everyone lived happily
Yeah.
ever after, and Theoden became Senator Robert Blutarski or whatever.
I did not think we'd be referencing John Landis
No,
movies today, but here we
it
are.
wouldn't be Theoden because Theoden dies. It would be Aragorn becomes Senator Robert Blutarski.
I kind of felt like Aragorn had more going for him than Pluto did, but he's more otter than that. But okay.
Pants optional.
Well, also an Animal House, as it turned out. So Wow.
Oh man. Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Are we speechless? Have we talked about all there is to talk about?
I mean, I think we could talk forever about this, but y'all
I,
y'all have done an incredible job of answering all of my questions, and I really appreciate it. Because again, I was like, I'm glad people are going to explain this to me because I feel like I got it, but boy, it would help to have living encyclopedias as you both are tonight to help me get through and go, oh, okay, now I got it. So,
what would have happened if they had finished this up with a second animated feature? Do you think they still would have made the trilogy?
oh, I think Peter Jackson was going to do that anyways. He talked about wanting to do it for years. He just waited till he had the funding and he had the tech for it. So yeah, I think they would have done it. Yeah. I don't think that was going to stop him at all. Because I don't
Yeah.
think anything they would have done. I mean, I'm not giving a rating yet or whatever, but like nothing here is so definitive like you can never touch it. There's nothing that's like Jaws or Back to the Future about this that like you can't, or Casablanca, maybe to do a more classic film that you just can't redo, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, and to
Ugh.
be
I
fair,
can't imagine
they
Casablanca being redone.
Yeah.
go watch Overdrawn at the Memory Bank. Half of it is Casablanca, and
Okay.
half of it is cheesy Canadian public television sci-fi starring Raul Julia.
Okay. That's
Well, when you put it like that.
that actually sounds intriguing and like a future episode, but just stay tuned.
Just watch there. It was an MST3K movie, and it's fabulous. It's really funny.
That does sound
That sounds
But
great.
also, Raul Julia is surprisingly great in like
Rob Julie is
the
good in like
Casablanca sections. Yeah,
all kinds of random stuff. He's good as a bad guy in a throwaway Clint Eastwood movie called The Rookie with Charlie Sheen as a cop. Like it's
I just watched that recently, I
yeah,
think.
it's not
I
bad.
don't
It's
we just like randomly stumbled on it and
yeah,
put
it's
it on.
from
It's funny.
one of Clint's forgotten non-Dirty Harry
Yeah.
movies, but it could have been one. Like it's very much in the get off my lawn stage of Clint's cop career and
Mm.
stuff. But um and Charlie Sheen was definitely hashtag winning all over that movie. You could see it on his nose. But anyway. Speaking of things that should have been rotoscoped.
Who Ron, you might know this. Like what was the intended audience for this movie? Was it because it's animated, so I immediately think, well, they clearly made it for children, but it's really scary.
they
But
did.
Secret of the Nymph, also
Mhm.
children,
Well,
also really
this
scary.
one was not directed towards children because by this point, Bakshi had made a name for himself as an animator for adults. Like his
Okay.
big breakout movie is this X-rated cartoon, Fritz the Cat, where Fritz the Cat like does drugs and
Like,
has sex and
yeah,
does all
let's
these
think
shenanigans.
about that, y'all. That would be like if John Holmes got cast as James Bond or something. Like the idea of that's wild. You got this porno animated director to do this.
No, that's like when Jim Wynorski makes an actually good 80s horror movie and then ends up directing, gay softcore porn in the
Better
2000s.
yet, it would be like Clive Barker doing a Home Alone sequel. I mean, it could happen, but it's going to be a different take.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, so he was already primarily known as like a dude who did stuff for adults, and all of his other properties are like pretty like adult oriented things.
This is
Okay.
PG,
And
right? Like this
yeah,
PG
and
rated.
and,
Okay.
and Lord of the Rings itself wasn't necessarily a kid's property then either.
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
It's kind of become a children's property because it's, something that you pick up and read. And like you read The Hobbit when you're like in fourth grade or fifth grade or whenever, and then you read Lord of the Rings in middle school, and then, you're watching Conan the Barbarian a dozen times a day or whatever if
Yeah,
you're
tell
me.
me of the days of high adventure, but yeah.
Yeah. What is best in life? Watching some rotoscoped horses falling over. Speaking of the death of King Theoden,
True.
as he's crushed by his horse. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was. I think the 70s was a lot more forgiving when it comes to doing experimental things like making animation for adults that you can't really get away with now
Well,
because honestly, adult animation now is like animation for adults who have the sense of humor of children, unless you're talking like Miyazaki or something.
Okay, the thing you just said though, Ron, and I noticed it watching this movie. The very first thing you see on the screen is the logo for United Artists. I dropped Heaven's Gate earlier, and they were the last studio that really let the artists run and do stuff. This property wouldn't exist, nowadays. It wouldn't get done. I mean, A24 might do it or something, but even then, it would be a different sensibility. United Artists really did let guys like Bakshi and Michael Cimino and all these others just go and do things. Forget the rating, forget the budget. Sometimes just go and make interesting things happen. And I feel like there is much to credit slash blame, whatever you want to do, for why this exists the way it does. But to I think what you were getting at, Lindsay, is who was it marketed to? Because Rankin and Bass
Yeah.
Hobbit, that's a kid's thing. And they did the Return of the King follow-up to this, and that's definitely a kid's thing. I remember that. So that's not a kid's
Which
story
is
either.
wild because the Return of the King is the darkest part. It's like Harry
Right.
Potter, right?
Yeah.
The later the book in the series, the darker
Well,
and darker it gets.
I mean, hell, even Breaking Dawn was the dark version of the Twilight movies. I mean, that's when that
Mhm.
stuff got dark. So yeah.
And let me tell you, the one of the few things Bakshi and Saul Zaentz still agree on to this day is that Rankin Bass Hobbit adaptation can eat a bucket of shit. Because they are both, at least the last time I read anything about Bakshi where he talked about it, he was still kind of pissed off that they attempted to rush that thing into production. And he said, like, one of the things he did was he went and met with Tolkien's widow and the Tolkien family, and he was like, "You're what I'm going to do is not going to be like that piece of shit Rankin and Bass thing. It's actually going to respect your source material. I'm going to have to cut some stuff out, but it's my job to. I'm not here to tell a new story in your universe. I'm here to tell the story J.R.R. Tolkien wrote to the best I can do with my budget." And I think he really kind of stuck to his mission on that one.
I agree. I think he did a great job within budget using the tools that he had at his disposal at the time. And I know there was a lot that gets covered in that first like 3 to 5 minute opener, however long that little opening bit is, giving all the backstory. But I really like the silhouette tools that they used to tell it. It worked for me. I thought it was beautiful and it told the story, and I don't know. I liked that they used what they could.
And one of the fun things is Peter Jackson has gone back and forth over the years about whether or not he's seen the Ralph Bakshi one or not. But when you get the introduction of the hobbits in this movie and the Proudfoot has his feet up on the table,
Mhm.
Jackson legit steals that shot
Yeah.
for his movie. From the same camera positioning and everything, the same like kind of shot down, you shoot up at the feet, make them look even bigger. Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's I think now he's more open to admitting that he saw that movie and took some
I
inspiration
didn't
from it.
think that was even a question. I had read
Yeah.
that this movie was Peter Jackson's gateway drug into Lord of the Rings, that he saw this movie first,
Mhm.
and that's how he was introduced to Lord of the Rings, and then he read all the books and got into it.
There have apparently been a couple different versions of this story over the years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much tea, we don't know which flavor's right.
I know.
Yeah. So
But they're
much
serving it.
New Zealand breakfast tea.
Mm, I haven't had the pleasure of trying that type of tea.
Dang. But now I kind of want to.
Only if the black shirts brew it. I bet those boys brew a mean cup of tea.
Bet you
Oh, 100%.
so.
And
Yeah.
Oh, well, guys, I think we've covered a lot. I think it's time. I think it's that time of night to get some popcorn ratings. Jay, as a first viewer, well, I guess, is this the first time you watched this? Yeah, I mean,
No, I know
I
I've
know you saw
seen
it
it,
twice,
but I don't.
but
It's the first time I've paid this close attention to it.
okay. All
So
right. Well, let's start with you. Let's
yeah,
get
I'm
your
definitely the
popcorn
newbie
rating.
here. Well, again, I say thank you to both of you for entertaining my myriad of questions because I definitely had a lot being the newbie here, and that was the fun part. The I think I said the first time I watched this, I was just sort of making notes and writing questions and like, okay, I gotta Google this, I gotta look this up, and I couldn't just Googled all of it or bothered to try to read, that dense book in, 4 days or whatever. But I was like, no, I have people that can explain this to me, so I'm just gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I got into it close to the end of the first time watching it, and then the second time I was like, I'm just gonna watch it. I'm just gonna roll with it and see what happens. And if there's anybody listening to this that hasn't seen this or doesn't have any connection to all of this, I can tell you now, you can just watch this and it will get you where you need to go from point A to B, even though it is incomplete. Like it's not the perfect ending and all that kind of stuff. I don't hold this movie against that because they didn't know at the time. Like they were going to make this. They intended to do it. It just, life and whatever, and producers hating directors and whatnot. But just as an experience, gosh, there's so much good artistry here and there's good performances, and to take such dense material that is completely foreign to you unless you are steeped in it and present it in a way that is economical and is a lot of fun, is commendable. And so I had a really good time with this, and it's one of those that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to add this to the library of things. And what it made me want to do, and this conversation in particular has just reinforced this, is like I'm gonna go buy the book. I saw it in the bookstore today, the big compendium all together in one. I'm gonna go buy that, read it, and then go back to those Peter Jackson movies too, because it's been years since I watched them. I want to know more. I want to be in the thing, and that's a testament to a medium that is adapted from something else. If it makes you want to go and seek out more of it, and to that credit, I give this movie a lot of credit. So I'm gonna give it a big old extra large popcorn with a lot of butter because I had a blast with it, and really am glad that we finally got to this one and got to this property on Film Strip here.
Nice. Ron?
We've talked for years about trying to get to the Lord of the Rings stuff on behalf of you or for your sake, Lindsay. And I'm really glad that we were able to finally, get something done, even though it was like not not the Peter Jackson one that I think that you we will eventually get to as well. But I feel like it was a nice table setter. It was a nice way to like kind of wet the whistle for that. And honestly, the story is still really well done. It's still really well told. It looks super cool. Like we cannot tell you how cool this thing looks and have it get over. Like some of the main character animation is can be hit or miss, but like rotoscoping is just so neat, and the whole thing is just neat, and I can't describe it other than that. So I'm gonna, even as an incomplete film, as an imperfect thing, it's probably one of the better Ralph Bakshi properties, um, and one of his best, like most complete stories. So I'm gonna go with a large popcorn with extra butter. Lindsay, your turn.
I am going to agree with you, Ron. The rotoscoping specifically, the whole animation style. Again, it has been at least 10 plus years since I've seen this, and I didn't remember how well it was animated. And I really, really ate that up. I loved that. I think that Bakshi did a great job being as true to the story as he could, given the limitations that he had. And I appreciate that. And I do fully think because not everyone, my husband included, wants to sit through what 6 9 hours of film to experience Lord of the Rings. I get that. I mean, I don't get that. I would absolutely do that every weekend of my life if I had the opportunity. But I understand that it's not for everyone. I think that this really gives you, as Jay put it gets you where you need to go. And it really does a great job of bridging the material. And it's a lot of material. So there were the cuts that were made were clearly intentional, and I appreciate that. I still, of course, will always be a huge sucker for the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings extended cut versions, but I will give this a really good large popcorn, plenty of butter, plenty of salt, all the good stuff. It definitely deserves it. So go give it a watch. It's an easy, I feel like 2 hours to get through. And the rotoscoping like fight scenes in it were really, really interesting and fun to watch. So big fan of that. Now, before we get to our normal closing, we have a really exciting, important, special announcement to make. This episode marks 15 years of Film Strip. We released our very first episode on April 10th, 2010, and we are still going. It helps that there are so many movies to review out there, good and bad, and we don't care. We'll review any of them.
Yes. Um, 15 years. Wow. I
I
can't really I have no concept of that. We hit, 400 earlier in 2025 here, and I thought that was nuts. And then when it popped up on the calendar, I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, 15 years of this podcast." That's yeah. No, I have no concept of how that occurs, but
Yeah, and
yeah.
I did my first episode, I think, at the very end of 2019 or early 2020.
Hmm.
So I've been here for a little over 5 now, and even that doesn't
Right?
feel like I've been around for that long.
Yeah.
The pandemic was weird, y'all. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what year I started, but you know,
The only reason I remember is because my first recording was literally the day I got in a car accident.
Right.
So
Yeah. It's a sessions show. I think you were
yeah,
laying on the
yeah. So I
couch. So
had I had a, I
right,
have a specific date like seared into my brain from that.
right,
But otherwise, yeah, I think I'd be with you, Ron. I don't think I'd
right.
remember, but
Rod, you've been with us since July 31st, 2014. So that's American Ninja. That's the
oh
first
man.
thing.
Well,
Yeah. So um you've been along for a lot of the ride. So
Jay, where did this film strip pod idea even come from? Give us the
uh
meet cute of film strip
it
podcast.
was Brian and I were doing the Art of Slaying, the Buffy podcast, and we decided each at the end of each season of Buffy shows we needed an extra episode, like a special. And the first season was obvious we were going to do the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, the Christy Swanson movie, which the whole
Mhm.
story about that is another story for another day. Of how that what you hear is like 3 recordings put together, y'all. So that's another day. But there's that, and then we were like, okay, well maybe we could do a movie podcast, and my friend Eddie, his wife Anna, I was going to a football game with them, and he had been telling me like, you need to talk to my wife. You two are both like movie and TV buffs, and we rode to Athens, Georgia, to watch Auburn lose to Georgia. Real shock. But the whole time, she and I are talking about like Friday Night Lights and all these movies we like and stuff, and Brian was like, "Well, I can't commit to do the movie podcast all the time, but if you want to do that, it could be like a side thing for the Buffy show and not just Buffy centric. We could just do movie stuff." And so I
Mhm.
pitched it to Anna, and she said, "Yeah, sure." And then the next thing you know, we did, I don't know, 30 or 40 episodes. The first like series we did proper was the Harry Potter movies, and in some ways, I regret that we burned them so long ago. But it was a a thing. It just grew out of that, and then it was me and Brian and Anna, and then Anna's kids got older and she got busy doing that, so she left the show. And I was like, okay, we need to find more people for the show. And then I met Kurt on Facebook because he had the Famous Factor podcast or the page. He didn't really have a podcast at the time. And that's where I met Nick because the way Nick writes, I thought, well, if he can write like that, he could probably talk. Yeah, having never heard him, and I got him on a show, and then Ron's wife is one of my oldest friends and kept telling me, you need to talk to my husband. And we argued about ninja movies on Twitter. And the next thing I know,
I was like,
Ron,
wait, wait, wait. I feel like I remember you saying you need to talk to my husband because he watches trash movies too.
that too. Yeah, that was also, yeah, Holly is
That
often
tracks.
derided my taste and stuff. So, fair, I'll admit that. So that, and then Ron led to Irina, who, and then led to you, Lindsay, and just, we all kind of met each other through the Vine through the years, and people have
Hmm.
come and gone off the show and stuff. But yeah, that's it. It started as an offshoot of the Art of Slaying show, which is wild because in 2025 they're talking about revitalizing Buffy and bringing Sarah Michelle Gellar back and all that stuff now, which Brian and I texted each other, like, does that mean we got to start the show again? Like, I don't know who wants to listen. We didn't think anybody would to listen to 30-year-old something dudes talking about Buffy at the time. I don't know who wants to listen to nearly 50-year-old dudes talking about Buffy, but maybe somebody does. So we'll see if they ever get the show off the ground. But no, the pod though would not exist though if one people still didn't listen to it, which people do, and it blows my mind that you do, and you leave comments and interact with us and stuff. But it wouldn't have lasted if Ron hadn't hung in here for this long with me and Lindsay, if you hadn't joined the show, because it was we were hitting a low energy point. We needed people, and to have fun people to do this with. It's I liken this podcast to very much like the band Genesis, if you know anything about their life. And their string of hits happened when it just became three dudes. And it was Mike and Tony and Phil Collins on the drums. And then they brought in, people here and there to be the instruments and stuff like that. But they figured out the formula there. So I feel like we hit our stride, 4 or 5 years ago with all this. And you know, and it's just still a lot of fun. So, that's why I do it. Why do you two keep doing it though? I got to ask y'all. I'm gonna put this to y'all. I mean, y'all been hanging around with this for a long time. What keeps you coming back to Filmstrip? Because we ain't making no money on this.
No.
I wish. Uh, yeah, it's fun. For a while when there was like the you took some time off, Jay, and we had a break for a little while in the film strip the film strip schedule. It was like, man, I really miss hanging out and recording and talking about movies and
Hmm.
stupidness with Jay and with Nick and Brian and sometimes Kurt and all the people that we had on prior to um Lindsey joining. And it was like, I miss just like kind of BSing with these people, and I really miss just like talking about movies. And I thought for a while I should just do my own movie podcast. And I was like, no, I don't have time for that. That's a lot of work. But like I can show up and do plot summaries, and I can show up and do a little bit of editing and a little bit of the social media stuff. Not much, not enough, but what I can do now. Um, but mostly, it's fun. Uh, we've met some really cool people doing this. Uh, Starting with Jay, obviously, he's a pretty cool guy. He'll say he's not, but that's a lie. Um, and you, Lindsay, and just it's been fun, and it's been a fun like keep me out of trouble sort of hobby, I guess.
Keep you out of trouble.
But hey,
So much
just wait.
trouble Ron could get
One of
into
these days, we're gonna launch a Patreon, and it's gonna be all over for everyone.
all over.
Yeah, Patreon with 3 people, each giving $1 a month.
Northeast.
Yep.
We can rent one movie between the three of us on Voodoo.
I rent my movies using my digital credits from Amazon.
There you go.
No, I've learned, I mean, starting this podcast, like you said, Jay, I met you through Irina. who had pulled you in to do some sound mixing for some plays that Irina and I both worked on.
Yeah.
And then I got brought in, and then the pandemic hit, and we all of a sudden had so much time to do podcasts. So I had this really cool opportunity to jump on and do podcasts with you guys. And I've learned so much more than I thought I needed to know about movies that aren't great.
Yeah.
And and some movies that are great, and some movies that I thought weren't great, and then by the end of the podcast decided I actually liked them, or vice versa.
The amount of times, like off mic, one of us is like, I came in thinking that was like a medium or a small popcorn, but after we talked about it, it slowly raised up my appreciation of the thing. I
Yeah.
think that's happened to literally everyone who's been on this podcast more
Yeah.
than once. And even some of those
Hundreds of
Yeah.
people who've
times.
only been on like one or two times, we've
Mhm.
definitely like changed their minds about things,
Oh yeah.
or they've changed our minds. It's been really interesting.
I think it's just if I don't like something, I have to really aggressively not like the movie to really give it a bad rating. But
Mhm.
I mean, outside of that, it usually gets a pretty good rating from me because after talking about it for an hour plus, I've come to a much greater understanding and or appreciation of it. And even the bad ones, like the cult classic, so bad they're good, or they're so goodly bad
Silent
that
Night, Deadly Night 5,
you
Street
just
Trash.
yeah. All of these. Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. I don't think that one came up when we were
Ye-
talking street trash, but it should have. Troll 2 came up a lot.
Mm. As it
But
should,
yeah,
by the way.
the Velocipaster, come on. I still think about that movie.
How can we not think about that movie? That's yeah.
Yeah, you'll be thinking
But
about
it's
that movie well into the
I wa
first course of shock therapy treatments that you need to forget the movie.
so true.
It does live with you though. So
But it's so fun to get introduced to movies I would never in a million years choose to watch myself and or revisit movies that I haven't seen in a while or introduce people to movies that I've really loved um and want to talk about and explore with other people. So it's just been so fun. And like Ron said, like I've met so many cool people that I talk to outside of this pod too. Our friends from Tis the Podcast, Two Girls, One Crypt,
hmm
you know.
Carmelita,
Yeah.
Will, yeah,
Yeah.
Matt Spalding, all the gang. Yeah.
It's just really it's
Mike.
really really neat to have this these cool friendships where you realize that a lot of us haven't actually met in person and but we talk to each other if not every day, I would say at least every other day. Like we talk all the time. And
hmm
it's just it's such a weird world that we live in, but I love it.
It's the fun part is like I say, I'm gonna watch a lot of movies anyway, so having somebody to talk with them about is fun. And that's half the fun sometimes when we do one of these things is like I can't wait to hear what y'all say
Yeah.
about it. Or I wonder what y'all are saying with this too. And every now and then one will be so striking that the text chain fires up when one of us is watching it, like, what in the is this? Or why the snakes, or whatever it is. And I can tell like what part you're on, especially if I know the movie, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. And so,
Yeah.
um, that's the fun part. But since we're at 15 years, and I talked about like we got a lot of stuff in the old back catalog here, we're gonna do something the back part of this year. We got a lot of stuff planned that we're recording, a lot of stuff coming out, over the next couple of months and stuff. But something I want us to do the back part of the year, and I'm going to leave it to the two of you to do, and Lindsay, particularly you're in because Ron has been around for a good bit of the catalog, but there are 100 episodes Ron wasn't on. Find one from Days of Yore that we did and we will do Film Strip Revisited. I'll take another run at it and see
Awesome.
if
Nice.
something has changed. And moreover, neither of you were on it, so it'll be fresh perspectives because there's a lot of fun movies in those first years that I've always been like, I wonder how I'd feel about that now, and I'll go back and watch the movie and I'm like, I don't know what I said, but I'm pretty sure I probably didn't like that, or maybe I would have done that differently. So that'll be a fun little exercise to do the back half of the year here.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna. Well, you two cooked that idea up. It's just taking us a while to get to this point to do it. So I'm game for it. It'll be a lot of fun. But
Good for us.
yeah,
I don't
so-
remember cooking that idea
yeah,
up.
I was
but-
gonna say, yeah, I don't remember that
Go
at all.
us.
But that
it's in
sounds
one
like
of
us.
the. It is in one of the many text chains that
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
had through the years, and I just filed that away. I'm like, okay, I gotta have like a good excuse to launch that from, or a good place to, because that's just how my brain works. So. But I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll do that, and so that'll be fun. But yeah, before then, we got lots of other cool stuff going on. I mean, we've got some planned guests to come up, and we won't tease anymore about what they're going to do. But we're going to be wrapping up the Star Trek series here, fairly soon, and then I've launched the Double O film strip thing with the James Bond stuff, which seems real prescient now that they sold out to Amazon. So we'll definitely talk about that at the session show with all the guys talking Bond. But yeah, gonna do that, and then our usual, brand of nonsense here on Film Strip as we get through the summer months and stuff. And one thing I can tell that we're gonna do when we relaunched the show, Ron talked about the break we took. We came back and I said we need to have something called Summer of Stallone, where we just do like Stallone one-offs. And we're going to do another version of that, but not with Stallone. It's going to be the Summer of Swords and Schwarzenegger. We're going to take 3 Arnold sword and sandal flicks with some of our friends, but with our crew here to talk about some Arnold swinging sword stuff, and not that one scene in Terminator. So I realized after I said that. Whoop, back up. But yeah, we'll get into that later on in the year. But it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate both of you for always jumping in on this and being game to do crazy stuff. And we should send shout outs to our spouses who don't listen to the show, but who often get dragged into watching these things with us and question our sanity.
Hey, to be fair, my spouse does listen to the show.
She does, yeah. Holly does listen to the show.
I don't know why, but she does.
Well, if she didn't listen to it, you would have never been brought to it. So I got to give her that. So I appreciate that.
Well, no, I don't know why she listens to the ones I'm on, because like you hear enough of my voice all day complaining about movies.
I'm sure, like everyone else, she appreciates your insight, and also can't wait to see how you try to kill both of us by cracking us up with your witty plot summary. As they
Ron's plot summaries are
Yeah.
choice.
Like if we had an org chart, Ron would be like head writer. So
He would be.
yeah, you're our Tina Fey, as it were. But yeah,
Ron is our Tina Fey. Yep.
yeah.
Does that make you Lorne Michaels, Jay?
God, I hope not. I guess it does. Lauren was never on the show though, so
Lorne was always on the show, but just he wasn't he still
Wasn't.
shows up
he
every
will every now and then. I guess
4 or
I'm
5
probably
times a
more of
season.
the less problematic versions of Vince McMahon in the WWF. Let's go with that.
So you're Triple H.
There we go. I wish I was that cool bald, but yeah. So,
you don't look like Triple H, Jay, but every so often, if I catch you drinking at the right time and I say the right stupid thing, you'll spray the
I
water
will say
everywhere.
that is true. I have to be careful. Usually it's when I know you're muted and Lindsay's talking, because I can usually get the swallow in at that point. But yeah, it's happened before. It'll happen again.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
15 years.
Mhm. Happy
Well
quinceañera.
done. Yes. Happy quinceanera. We need ball gowns.
This podcast is old enough to get a learner's permit, and that should worry everyone.
This podcast is officially too old for redacted.
There you go.
Well, thanks for sticking with us, everybody, for 15 years. Or if you've just joined us for the first time, feel free to take a look back in the archives and look forward to us revisiting some of those on the back half of this year. But until then, please Find and follow us on social media. You can find us at Film Strip Pod. We share announcements about upcoming shows as well as other fun content. And don't forget to subscribe and share the show. Bonus points if you leave us a positive review, as it helps other people find our podcast and it makes us feel really good about ourselves. Until next time, thanks for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.